Order. Well, thank you. This is our public inquiry, our brief public inquiry into women into construction. We have Kath Moore with us and Jacqui Wordsworth. Kath, I think this was your brainchild, Women into Construction. Can you just very briefly, before we go into the main round of questioning, tell us what led you to create this organisation? Because I also believe we're in Women in Construction Week as well at the moment. So please tell the committee why you thought this was important.
Okay, so I'm a carpenter. I trained as a carpenter when I was 19. I fell into it really by accident, but I found that I absolutely loved it. I loved the whole thing of structure. When I started, I thought maybe it was furniture and that kind of thing, but then I discovered it was structure, and I was building walls and floors and roofs and staircases, and I absolutely loved it. So I worked for a small company that focused on renovations for a few years, and again, absolutely loved the work. I was ever the only woman on site, so that was a little bit lonely, but I very much enjoyed the work, and every day is different. You're learning constantly, and I did really feel that here I am, I'm the only woman on site, but surely there's going to be a flood of women coming in afterwards. There's bound to be. It's such a great area of work. That firm went bust after a few years, and I set up my own business. So I worked for myself for a while, and then I went into teaching carpentry, and I found that I would be teaching a class mainly of young lads and one or two women. And at the end of the course, the women would do really well. They would often concentrate a lot more, mess around a lot less, and but at the end of the course, the guys got the jobs and the women never got the jobs. And year after year, this was repeated. And I felt there is something going on here. We've got all these great women coming through and they're not getting into work. And then an opportunity came to set up a project on the Olympic Park, on the Olympic build. This was 2008, to support women into the build on the for the Olympics. And I thought, yes, this is something that I would like to be involved in. This is the next stage for me. And so I went and set up the Women into Construction project on the Olympic Park. And we were very successful. We more than doubled the numbers of women working in construction on the park, but more to the point, we changed the culture. It was acceptable and it was normal to see women at all levels. So we had women driving trucks, we had bricklayers, we had painters, we had construction managers, we had engineers, and so that was that. And then from there, when the Olympic build finished, which for us was in 2011, we went back to our funders and said, look, we've got something that really works here. Can you continue to fund us? And we'll try and see if we can deliver it across London. So we did, and that worked also really well. And since then, we've continued to develop as an organisation, and now we're working pretty well nationally. So that's a kind of very short synopsis of...
Well, and fantastic, amazing. And then Jacqui joined you in 2017, and they say the rest is history. Or you're making new chapters to your book. I'm just going to bring in Giles now, who's got a couple of questions.
Thank you, Sir Charles. It is an amazing story, and particularly going into that construction site 2008, when it was massive. It was the biggest thing going. But it sounds like a silly question, really, but, you know, what does women into construction actually do? By which I mean, how do you do it? Who do you talk to? How do you liaise with people? How does it work?
Jacqui, do you want to have a quick go at this?
Yeah, go, Jacqui.
And then Kath can follow on.
Well, first off, we try and encourage as many women as possible to think about construction and engineering as a sector, because we know there are some amazing jobs here, as we've heard from some of our other colleagues. And so we go out and we speak to women, we attract them to our information sessions, we give them careers advice and guidance to tell them about the plethora of jobs that are available.
You hold sort of jobs fairs or something?
We do online events and we do events in locations.
Right.
And then we give them that guidance and help put them through some training so they can get on site, and we put them through some work experience so that they can get to try it before they make a decision. And really the aim is to increase that supply of women that are considering construction. But it's no point doing that unless we've got contractors on the other side of the table who are willing and keen to take them on.
Yeah.
So the demand side of the equation is for us to talk to contractors from clients all the way down through the supply chain and talk to them about their recruitment needs and understand how the barriers are there to encourage women into their businesses. And we try and break down those barriers through our employment programmes.
So exactly on that point, do you meet resistance along the way? And do you find it relatively easy to overcome?
We have had a lot of resistance over the years. I think that picture has changed in the last few years as diversity and inclusion has come up higher on the agenda for a lot of the main contractors and the client organisations, particularly through public sector procurement. I think we are pushing an open door now in terms of having those conversations with companies. But it's still challenging in terms of, it's great to talk the talk, but actually when we say, will you take a woman on work placement, will you give her a job, that's sometimes when the barriers come up again.
Right, but you've moved a long way. Can I ask you how many women you've worked with?
Well, in 15 years, we have supported over 4,500 women through our programmes. We've trained 2,700. Put 1,000 through work placements, and just last year, our 15th year of operation, we got over 1,000 women into work. So we're really proud of that statistic.
Okay, so this is my final question really. There are so many different jobs within construction. Are there some that women tend to go towards and that men will fill, or is it sort of even across the board? How does it work?
There are no jobs that are gender specific in construction.
Yeah.
Women can do any of them, and for us it's about opening up those opportunities so that they can see what they are and to have a go at them and see if they are for them. In our programmes, we find that some roles are easier to start with to get to know the construction sector. So at an entry-level position, something like a document controller is a really good position to find out about construction and then decide where you want to go next. For the women that come to us through further or higher education, they've already made a decision around their career pathway, and then it's about, again, speaking to companies who have vacancies in those areas. So we get a lot of women interested in site management and process management, those kind of roles at a white-collar level. But it's across the board, and I think we've had women that are interested in absolutely everything from quantity surveying to plant to, the works.
Okay, and final, if I may, are women, we've heard evidence from elsewhere, but are women surprised at the opportunities? Do you find that?
Yeah. There's nothing better than doing a site visit with a bunch of women who have never set foot on a building site before, and to hear from some of the companies the roles that they take on, and to walk around and see what's possible in terms of building something tremendous. And without fail, the women come out from our programmes excited about the opportunities and go, I never knew that was possible, or, and it is such a fantastic career opportunity. So it's about raising that awareness and then giving them the tools and the confidence to come and have a go with this.
That's so encouraging. Thank you, Sir Charles.
Me?
Marion.
Yes, please, Sir Charles. So, why do you think it's important to encourage women into construction?
Kath, why don't you start with that,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to Jacqui.
So, equality. There are so many fantastic opportunities, and it gives women, a much wider choice of careers. I think it's a hugely satisfying career. It's a type of career that you can progress in. There are real opportunities. It's well paid. So we find that sometimes when we're doing work with schools, I have encountered doing some kind of, a jobs event, and the schools will come in and the girls will go off to hair and beauty, and the girls will be directed to construction. Yeah. Yeah. And guess which is better paid and also has far more, I think just far more interesting opportunities at the end of it, and possibility for progression, as well as we've heard elsewhere. There's real opportunities to move within and to expand in various areas of work.
I can say from personal experience, my granddaughter was, because she wears false eyelashes and makeup, was told at a careers fair, beauty therapy, and I think that's the last thing she'd ever want to do. No, I'm definitely going to talk to her about this. So we're here on the estate. We've heard from the women who are working here. So what do you think that the Parliament can really do to really encourage more women to take up roles here? And are they doing it okay at the moment?
We've had a few meetings now here in terms of understanding what goes on here, and I think it's clear that from the parliamentary teams there's a really good representation of women at senior level and down through the workforce, which is great to see, and I think we've been encouraged by that. I think we've heard that there are some really fascinating career choices to be had here as well, so there's a great opportunity. For us, I think it's about the what next. It's understanding where your baseline is, being really clear about what the data's telling you in terms of how many women you've got, where they are across the organisations, and where perhaps you need to place some emphasis. And then looking forward, particularly as we move into the bigger programmes, be that capital programmes, the maintenance across the estate, and of course the restoration and renewal programme, huge opportunity for creating new jobs, but making sure that those jobs can be open to women as well.
Could I just add that this is a real opportunity for Parliament. This is a really high-profile site, and everyone's heard of it. Everyone knows what a fantastic opportunity it is, and so this is an opportunity for education to also educate women and girls about the different types of opportunities that are available. And if Parliament is offering it, then you are leading the way. There is a real chance that you can make a change here.
Yeah.
There'll be some great stories to tell. Let us
There
hope.
will.
Right, I'm going to bring in Nav and then Michael. Nav.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for joining us. So there does seem to be a significant issue around gender parity in the construction industry, the sector. So what do you think are the key barriers preventing women from entering the construction trade?
Yeah, we have worked with a lot of women, as you've heard, over the years, and I think there are some key barriers that come up time and time again in terms of the women that we talk to. Certainly discrimination and discriminatory behaviour on site is still prevalent. The dial has moved slightly, but we still hear comments on site, and some of our women, when they're out on work placements...
The biggest issue, do you think?
It's one of the issues. It's not the single biggest issue. Lack of suitable PPE in welfare facilities, absolutely common in terms of finding the right kit. It's a health and safety issue if you haven't got the right size boots on. But also, if you have to walk 20 minutes across site to go to a locked toilet, it's going to affect your productivity and your confidence at work. So they're really easy things that we can fix. Exclusion is a big issue in terms of the language that's used in offices on site. It's great if everybody's having a chat about the golf day, but if you're not particularly into golf, then that's something that can exclude you from those conversations. And I think in a lot of the instances that we understand, a lack of networks and a lack of support, if you're the only woman in your team or the only woman on site, it can be a bit lonely, and you do have to project confidence and be assertive in your demeanour at work. And that can be quite challenging to sustain over a period of time. So that's a number of barriers, but the single biggest barrier that we find in terms of getting women into work and then keeping them there is around job flexibility. The women that we work with who are adults and come to us either unemployed or career changers, if they have caring responsibilities outside work, it's trying to find roles that will facilitate those. It's persuading employers that construction can be done flexibility and that you don't have to start at 7 o'clock every morning, that there could be different shift patterns. And if you're a young woman and you don't need that flexibility to start with, at a certain point in your life you might do. And then it's difficult to stay in construction. And so we have an issue in terms of retention and dropout that needs to be addressed. So I think, again, coming back to your question, Marion, what can we do? It's about trying to instil some best practice through the parliamentary estate to look at some of these barriers and see what you can do to address it.
Thank you. I had a follow-up question regarding what impact bodies like House of Commons can have. I think with that, Kath addressed that in the previous question. So on the flip side, what are the challenges for organisations when encouraging women into the construction industry? Or are there any? Or...
There are, I think, in terms of the companies that we work with. Some of the larger companies, the main contractors, the tier ones, have got a strategy, they've got a plan, they're addressing this issue. Where we find the challenges is further down the supply chain, who maybe have been told to do this, a part of the procurement strategy, but don't necessarily have the buy-in in terms of how to do it, or the frankly the resources to do it. So I think cascading that knowledge and understanding through the supply chain is something that is a challenge for a lot of our contractors.
Do you think in some organisations do this as a tick box exercise just to secure a contract, or is there a lot of that in the industry?
I think there's an element of that in terms of tenders, but it's the better organisations that we work with follow through and deliver on those promises and really embrace that challenge. And I think it's something that we can work on down through the supply chain, for sure.
Thanks.
Yes, we do find that a lot of, particularly the social value managers that we work with, really believe in this and really want to make it work. So, you know, it enables us to facilitate it, to just help make it happen.
Yeah. One of the challenges we find is that social value managers are fully up for it and they want to employ a more diverse workforce, want to create new jobs. But actually when that contract has been priced, there's no headroom for additional individuals on the site, no additional training positions and no flexible positions. So actually that subcontractor is constrained in terms of how that's being procured, in terms of offering those opportunities. So I think how you procure and what you can build into those procurement packages is something to be looked at.
Okay, thank you. Michael's going to act as the sweeper now, just making sure that if we've missed any questions, they get asked. So, Michael, over to you.
So, Kath, you were talking about your experience being a woodwork teacher, which reminded me, I'm afraid, rather similarly of my experience also in a woodwork class, not as a teacher. And I would have been one of your worst students, flinging things around and all the rest of it. But that also brought me on to, in my mind, something else you were talking about in schools generally. Do you think that school career masters and mistresses, or teachers, whatever we call them now, are sufficiently advanced? That sounds an incredible thing to say in 2024, but sufficiently advanced or open-minded to suggest to their girl pupils that they should go into construction?
I think they could have more, we could support our teachers more with education about construction and the different opportunities there are available. Everyone knows what a doctor does and what a lawyer does and what a politician does, but construction is a bit of a grey area. People don't realise the breadth of opportunities. We've all been to the doctors, we've all been to hospital, but you can't just walk onto a construction site. You can't really see how these things work. So, that can be a bit of an issue. But yes, I think we should support the teachers more so that we don't.
There is a role, for example. I mean, I'm not that familiar with construction. I mean, I used to set up radio and television stations, but other people did the actual building part of it. But there's, for example, I think the Construction Industries Association and organisations like that. Do you think they could be doing more? Have you approached them at all and said, look, you could have a real role here in making contact with schools and promoting the industry?
Yes, the Construction Industry Training Board do a lot of work. They do a massive amount to promote the industry.
Do they promote the industry as also a job for women, or?
Yes,
they do.
They have female role models. So they've got a fantastic website, Go Construct, which is all about the different roles available, and they showcase women doing those roles.
That begs the question: if there is all this, why isn't it working? Why is it that the girls go off and do one thing and the boys go off and do something? Nothing seems to have changed since when I was at school.
Okay, so that's a website that Go Construct. We need more than that. We need, more support for the teachers, more education for the teachers about the fantastic opportunities. Was mentioned elsewhere that there is a bit of a preconception that, in a job you either use your brains or you use your hands, and construction, of course, is both. And so there can be a feeling of, amongst teachers that, we'll send the ones who are not going to make it to university off to construction. And we need to challenge all these preconceptions about construction, not just for girls, but for boys as well.
Well, thank you. And just before you go, I'd like to thank my colleague Natalie Elphick, who I know has been working closely with Women into Construction, and Natalie helped facilitate this session, namely by introducing us to each other. So in Natalie's absence, I'd like to thank her. One final question, though. Further education colleges. Are you working with further education colleges? I'm sure you are. Are they receptive?
Yes, we do. That's one of the many routes that we go and find our women from. So we have good relations with FE colleges, HE colleges, DWP in terms of job centres. For us, it's about finding women everywhere. And the women that are on those programmes have already made a positive choice for construction, so that's great. Mm-hmm. We want to scoop them along and make sure they get the jobs at the end of it. But for us, it's also about challenging those women who've never considered it. So career changers, those women who've got good transferable skills from other sectors that could really add value to the construction sector. So we want to find as many women out there as possible from all avenues.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being so concise, because we're back on time now for our final panel. Thank you very much, Kath and Jacqui. I hope you can stay and listen to the last set of witnesses.
Proceeding is currently suspended. The proceeding is currently suspended. The proceeding is currently suspended. The proceeding is currently suspended.
Order, order. Well, thank you for joining us today. For those viewing, we all know who you are, but anybody watching this will know that we're about to seek evidence and receive evidence from house authorities and people involved with restoration and renewal. Can I quickly ask you all, for the benefit of those sitting behind you and the benefit of anyone watching this session today, to introduce yourselves?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Chris Elliott, Managing Director of Strategic Estates at Parliament.
Hi, and I'm Gemma Collins, and I'm Director of Property and Asset Strategy in Strategic Estates, the House of Commons.
Matthew White, Programme Director for the Delivery Authority for Restoration and Renewal.
And hi, good afternoon. I'm Janet Campbell. I'm the HR Director for the Delivery Authority.
Thank you very much for joining us today. So can I just ask a quick question? We've just had Women into Construction give evidence. And earlier today in private session, we had some of the women who work on the estate giving evidence in private about their experiences. What have you made of what you've heard so far today? I mean, the House has a good story to tell, but what more could we be doing, and what more would you like to do? Start with Chris, and we'll work our way down.
Thank you, Sir Charles. I think a lot of what we've heard from Women into Construction resonates. I think we are doing some good things. We've got some good data as a client organisation in terms of where we are, for example, as Strategic Estates. So to give you some statistics, we have 55% of my entire organisation are women. 5 out of 6 of my senior managers who report to me are women. We have women operating in a whole breadth of roles across the organisation. So 40 women who are in frontline project management roles. We have them in administration roles, and we also have them in highly technical roles. So our head of architecture is a woman, our principal electrical engineer is a woman. However, there's more that we can do, and I think a number of the topics that have been talked about are things which are things we are actively looking at and want to pursue. So there's more we can do, and it's great to have the opportunity to talk about it today, because with your support, we can do more. And
I think we'll come on after this brief session, this sort of first round of questions, on to how we can work better with perhaps our contractors, because obviously you have suppliers. Gemma?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, my professional background is an architect, so it was interesting hearing the commentary today. I can relate to many of what they've said. I've been in the industry for 30 years. I have seen improvements, but there's obviously still a long way that we can go. And I think some of the key areas that they talked about, which is welfare facilities, it was talking about also having kind of support, I think, is really important. Mental role models that you can speak to, I think, would another one. And I think the other thing that they touched on slightly was understanding technical capability. And as a woman, something that I've come across is whether you are taken seriously when you're in a technical role and how you can support people and grow people's confidence in that field as well.
Matthew.
So, I mean, for restoration and renewal, we are absolutely committed to making R&R an attractive and rewarding programme to work on for women. The important thing, I think, is to say why, and sometimes we lose that message. Having worked on 7 major construction programmes and been lucky enough to do so, I have absolutely learned that the most successful teams within those programmes are the ones with the most diverse community of people. And that's both gender diversity but background diversity as well. So when we advertise for roles and looking for the future, I do think that the construction industry has a bit of an image problem. What I need in the team to support engineering construction are problem solvers, people with ingenuity, creativity, forensic planners, change managers and risk managers. That's all the broad aspect of construction and engineering. And I think we've heard today that it is much broader than from what you see out on the street, because it tends to be the scaffolding, the digging the holes in the roads, which is an important part, but that's only a fraction. That's the tip of the iceberg to a very exciting and rewarding industry.
And Janet, you are the HR guru.
Indeed.
So you sort of have a huge role to play in attracting these diverse teams into the industry and into restoration and renewal. What challenges are you facing and what successes are you having?
Absolutely. So I think it's really important to just pick up on what Matt's saying. So we are really keen to make sure that the delivery authority is an attractive, inclusive and a place for women to come into. So we've got a range of things that we're already doing, and hearing the earlier evidence, it's great to hear that some of the things we are doing is absolutely what's required in the industry to attract women. So if I just give a couple of examples, if I may, while I have the floor. So if I think about just attracting in the very first instance, just a couple of things it's worthwhile just talking about. The first is we use a gender decoder on our job descriptions and our job adverts. And a gender decoder is a tool that enables you to analyse the words in a job description, in other written material, to pick out any bias that may be either gender bias or otherwise, or exclusive. And we use that gender decoder to make sure when we're advertising jobs, we're using language that's inclusive and encouraging from the very outset. I think when we think about a job description, quite often, job description can run to 6 pages or something, and there's a massive list of all these essential requirements. And we know, research shows us that women are very likely to rule themselves out at the application stage if they can't tick off all of the essential requirements. So what we are trying to do as a matter of course is to reduce the list of essential requirements in any job description. And I think the final thing I'll say at this point is just around pay. We heard about pay earlier on. Pay is really important to have pay transparency. And all of our jobs in the delivery authority, the salary is advertised with the job. We don't ask applicants to disclose their salary history through the recruitment process. And that's really important because that means as an organisation, we reduce the opportunities to bring into the delivery authority historical pay gaps that have existed.
Really smart.
Yeah.
That's really smart. Right, Nav.
Thank you to all of you for joining us. I have 2 questions as follow-ups from some of the colleagues who work on the estate frontline that we heard from. My first question is, what happens if someone working on the estate who isn't employed directly by the House of Commons or House of Lords, if they face discrimination, is that something they would take up with their employer, or would that be something they would take up with the House authorities? And my second question is, we've got some data here for gender parity or gender split with the various contractors and overall. I'm just wondering, when it comes to recruitment of women, Is the House open to recruiting from all sort of different communities, as in ethnic diversity? London's quite a diverse place. And how is that going, if there are any comments on that?
Shall I lead off on that? So on the first question, in the first instance, they would raise that with their employer, but there's always if that's not being resolved at a local level, we as the client organisation have to take an attitude where we can support that individual if they're not getting that resolution. I think on the second matter, yes, we are open. I can just say we are open to applications from any background, any walk of life. So
on the first question, sorry, Chair, if I may. So is there an advertised process, for example, for people working for IPSO, people working for House of Commons, there's ICGS, that is widely advertised?
Yes.
For issues relating to the people working for contractors, is there an advertised route that they can pursue?
They will have their own. Each company will have their own. No,
I appreciate that. But if they're not getting any progress or any movement on that, is there an advertised process, or they would just speak to?
They would just speak to us. I would need to go away and check their specific access to ICGS.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
I'm not sure if ICGS is open to contractors or.
It will be.
Okay. And is it possible, Chair, to have some data on the ethnic diversity of the workforce in future, or is that not possible? Or maybe something to discuss later on. So, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Marion.
Could you go to someone else first?
I will.
Please.
I will go to Giles.
Thank you very much. Give Marion a little time. One thing that's cropped up, and I think this is probably for Matthew and Chris, I don't know, and probably Janet as well, but it's one thing that's cropped up in the evidence we've taken today, is when we're talking about equality, etc., is the provision of basic things like PPE and toilets. I mean, as Programme Director and as MD, what are you going to do about that? Because it's a fundamental, it's just wrong. Chris?
So it is fundamentally wrong. So two things, and it was disappointing to hear, but it's very relevant and it resonates with those two things. So one of the things that we are actively looking at doing is how can we contractually mandate the fit of PPE, appropriate fit PPE is one thing that we will actively be looking in one of our plans going forward. The second one is one of the things which has been important for me is that we are raising the standards of construction, welfare, accommodation across the estate in general, in a broader sense. Now, we are in the process of developing some new accommodation at the House of Lords end of Parliament, and it is our responsibility to make sure we get the right facilities in there that address this issue.
Absolutely, but with all due respect, this is something that should have happened years ago. If you have both men and women working on the same site, they should have access to the same facilities.
I agree.
Surely, okay. But you are getting onto it. Matthew, have you got anything to add on?
So it's certainly, for restoration and renewal, we're definitely in the foothills of the programme, but it's very important at this stage that we start as we mean to go on. And so we've recently procured a specially designed PPE that we're currently rolling out with the works as survey works that we've got progressing, and we also have acquired equal welfare facilities, which again only small at this stage, as the survey works are relatively small compared to the works that Strategic Estates are doing, but it's important to grow from there to show that we mean what we say in all aspects of it.
I'm just taken aback that it's only coming in now after having had this R&R being going on for some time. We've seen the entire Elizabeth Tower covered up and opened up again, and surely there were women working on that site as well.
So not part of the restoration and renewal programme.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have, I'm pleased to say, started with that equal diversity for gender and facilities on site.
Right, okay, Janet, have you got anything to add to that from the HR point of view?
So I think the only other thing I would add to what Matt has said in terms of our initiatives as the delivery authority going forward is that we are looking at having specially designed PPE for women, and that will include maternity ranges and also PPE for women who observe the hijab or the burqa. So that's things we're looking at now. So as Matt says, we start as we mean to go on.
And you can apply pressure from HR point of view on toilets as well?
Indeed. So it's about having equal welfare facilities for everybody from the very beginning, from the very outset.
Right, just finally, and this one for you, Gemma, is that, you know, what is has been your experience as a woman generally working in the construction industry?
Well, I think it's been a very positive experience. I also went into architecture because I loved kind of structures and building things and mathematics. And I also think being on site is really important because that's where you learn your technical skill set. I think one of the things is when I started in my architectural career, I didn't have any female role models. There were no female technical tutors who had practical experience. And I think that's one of the things that Parliament has supported me in, that I now do outreach with university students. So there is a kind of a connection into the day-to-day, and I think that's something that has been raised by people, is having someone that you can go and talk to and you can see that career path is really important. The other thing is that I think it's important to make sure that people are comfortable on site, and I think doing tours and opening up and allow those conversations is really important as well. And I think having that time for feedback, I think this has been a really positive forum in terms of it has allowed people to have that voice. So I think it's really important to ensure that strategic estates and Parliament as a whole continues to allow those forums to happen so we can get that full feedback. Because like you say, some of the things raised today, they were apparent when I started, and although I have seen positive changes, there's still obviously undercurrents of some of those things still happening. So I think, you know, I really applaud for this happening today to allow those, and I think it's something that we will take away from
We've come a certain way, but there's further to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mother of Parliaments, we should be leading the way.
There you go. Michael. So a couple of questions. I'm going to ask Gemma, as you've been in the business for a while. We heard earlier on that one person was challenged that a woman wouldn't be able to pick up a 100-kilogram pack of anything. I mean, having tried to pick up an 80-kilogram Royal Marines Bergen, I mean, 100 kilograms is a challenge to anyone. But my question, Gemma, is there anything in construction, in reality, that you think a woman can't do that a man could?
No, and I think there was a point raised earlier that was very relevant in terms of how people consider what the skills that are required in construction. And I think today, especially today, if you look at construction, there's such a wide range of skill sets that are needed and innovation that's needed. And I completely agree when Matthew raised earlier about the fact that you need that diverse and inclusive workforce. You know, for me, again, a meeting that has a range of diversity within it gives much better kind of perspectives and different outlooks and better solutions. So absolutely not. And also on site, Michael, you're only ever allowed to lift on your own 20 kilograms.
How much?
Without 20 kilograms.
20, right.
Without having someone to help you. So I think it's important. But I think everybody should have that opportunity, but it's making sure that you understand what is required to allow those people to be able to deliver that. And that's where we should be in today's society, because by having that kind of range of diversity and people involved, you do get better outcomes.
Oh, thank you. I want to ask Janet something, because I was intrigued by Janet's point, which I thought was excellent, actually, is that you don't import the unfairness in salaries from previous organisations. But that's in R&R. So I'm now going to swing over to Chris. Do we have a similar policy on the estate generally?
If I don't have the statistics to hand, Michael, but from the perspective of the gender pay gap, as Parliament as a whole, we've done a lot of work to close that gender pay gap.
And do you have that policy that Janet talked about, that when you bring in people from outside, you don't look at historically what their payment patterns
we operate
have been?
again. I don't have the details of the policy to hand, but we operate it as a policy Parliament-wide because we're part of strategic estates. So as opposed to where the R&R Delivery Authority is an organisation in its own right, we operate that as a Parliament as under Parliament's wider auspices, rather than having a strategic estate-specific policy.
So in the broadest possible way, you believe you are an equal opportunities employer?
Absolutely, and I can say from someone that kind of line manages and hires on quite a regular basis is that we don't discuss salary in the interview process, so it's completely separated. To
it's the price for the job, basically.
Yeah. So you are purely kind of talking to someone on a qualitative basis.
Right. Yeah.
Is it possible to get that data for the next meeting?
Yeah, sure.
Is that
yeah, no, I mean, that's as Chris says, that is a matter for the House. So there'll be a House policy. Yeah. So the Director of HR can provide us with what the House policy is on that. I don't want to lay this at Chris's door because he's part of, he does what the House does. I will go to Marion.
Yeah, thank you, and apologies.
No, not at all, Marion.
It's organised staff who have just arrived, and it's not easy. So we've already heard the whole business of how difficult it's going to be because the construction will take place during business as usual. And that could, I think, and we've already heard, it's going to be a bit more difficult sometimes to place women who might have difficulty working later because of caring responsibilities, other responsibilities. I mean, it shouldn't be, but has that been factored in to what you're doing? Is that what does your equality policies cover that kind of scenario as well?
From a restoration and renewal point of view for the future and our planning, it's a big feature of how we're looking at the work. When we're trying to take learnings from other industries. So in the railway industry, tend to work also outside business as usual if there's an operating business to maintain, and also in the airports. The airports especially have been very successful in promoting a flexible working and gender equal basis, with some, as I said earlier, around broadening the skill set out so that some of these skills actually don't need to be done and the jobs don't actually need to be done during when the site work is done, but actually it's the planning of the work that is actually adding more value to the construction industry and getting the job done well than actually sometimes doing the work. And so it's reinforcing and promoting those other jobs and those other skills and capabilities that was really attracting women into the industry.
Can I ask a question of the panel? Because clearly you will be direct employers, but you will also have a lot of contractors. What leverage do you have over your suppliers in regards to the framing of contracts for the recruitment of their own staff that then come and work here? I'll start with you, Chris, then go to Matthew, Gemma and Janet.
So one of the things we already do is within any procurement that happens at Parliament, any of our procurements or any broader procurements, we have, which covers this area, we have a clear and ambiguous weighting in that procurement around social sustainability, which includes things like gender diversity, and for example, when we survey our big suppliers, so I'm talking about our big suppliers now, most of them, about 80% of them, say they actively pursue schemes to encourage diversity. Pretty much all of those say they have positive schemes to help women into roles. So that's, I think we heard from, I think it was from Women into Construction earlier, that's most of the big suppliers in construction, so what you typically call the big tier one suppliers, have a plan, have a strategy, have the resources to do that, and we can hold them to account through our leverage, through that social sustainability weighting in our procurement. Where it becomes more challenging is making sure that flows down through the suppliers to some of the smaller suppliers. And I think the positive leverage that we as a client organisation have a role to play there, as well as with our weighting of saying, well, actually, unless you take this seriously, it's going to affect your procurement score, is actually the leverage that we can bring is actually we've got to recognise that we need to put some investment into this as well.
Matthew, Janet?
So our process is very similar to the one that Chris has just described for strategic estates. So our EDI policy is included with all of our contracts, key contracts, to ensure that there is, an opportunity, an environment of equal opportunity for everybody. We measure those. In our annual EDI report, we, as well as reporting on the diversity of the Delivery Authority as an independent entity, we also report on the diversity makeup of the entire Restoration and Renewal programme to include our key supplier data.
Okay, and how can, final question for me, I think Nav's got a concluding question, but how can you monitor, so there's one thing, here's the tender document, they have to fill in and they have to score highly on areas that are under discussion now, but how do you make sure that the words they put in those documents are actions? How do you monitor their performance against the tender requirements?
So I can answer that.
Yeah.
So currently on Normanshire North, and we also undertook it on One Derby Gate, we have key performance indicators. So we internally, we have 72, which we check against, and we work collaboratively with the contractor to see how they're meeting them. Because obviously for them to meet them as well, when it comes to social value, it also means sometimes that we need to change how we're working. And then what we've done is we've worked with an external consultant to look at the social value of that using the Treasury Green Book. And that allows us to put kind of a social value cost against it. So for instance, Normanshire North at the moment has had about £3 million we've worked out of social value within the social value bank kind of applied to it. And I think by looking at that, as was said by the ladies from into construction, it allows you to understand your baseline and then understand the actions that you need to take to improve on that.
And final question for me before I bring in Nav to wind up. So we've had women into construction. We've, outside this meeting today, we've had meetings with them. I don't think it's the first that was the first interaction you'd had with women into construction. But this is a loaded question, isn't it? Because you're only going to say yes. But is it possible that we can take forward this relationship and they can have a positive impact on our future hiring practices, bringing in their expertise and experience to support what we want to do and are already doing?
So absolutely, from a major programme's point of view, it's essential for us to paint that broader picture, which is working with various networks can absolutely help us do. Because I do know that major programmes in the past can sit back and wait for things to happen and wait for people to come to them. We need to get out on the front foot, on the doorsteps, working with networks to make sure that those messages are getting out.
Fantastic.
And the answer from the House authorities now is yes. So we've continued already to have that engagement, and listening to the feedback and the views we've heard today. A couple of the things that we were already thinking about, particularly in terms of the importance of education outreach, ambassadors in schools, mentoring for women in construction, are some ideas we want to take forward and learn from expertise as to how to do those best.
Brilliant. And now if you've got one last question, then we'll let you all go.
Thank you. This is for Gemma and Chris. Do you think, in your view, Parliament does enough to advertise networks like Parley Gender to women who work for contractors and other women who work on the estate?
I think I'd need to, if I may, give some more thought to that. So I have recently, for example, taken up I'm the Commons Executive Champion for the Parley Able Network, but it's very recent, so I would like to, and I'm only relatively recently into my role here, so I'd like to have a look at that in more detail.
And I think it's similar to the point that you raised earlier. I think we very much understand kind of the links and how for people that work directly for us, but in terms of working with our contractors, we need to understand that relationship.
Okay, fair enough. If we are not doing enough to advertise this Parley Gender group, is it something that could be taken forward, depending on how the group is set up and all of that? Or?
I can certainly take it away for discussion with my colleague on the executive board, who is the champion for the Parley Gender Network. Happy to do that.
Well, listen, thank you very much for coming here today and telling us what you're up to and answering our questions. I really appreciate that. We're ending 1 minute before time, so that's amazing in this place, as we all know, those of us who work here. Order. Thank you very much.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding